Well, hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. I am super excited about today's topic, systems thinking for administrative professionals, with my fabulous friend and business colleague, Chrissy Scivicque. I love her to death. I'm so excited we're doing something together because it's been a while. Let me make sure my chat box is on. Oh, there it is. Oh my gosh, I knew the names. All right, they're flowing in from all over Missouri and Las Vegas. Hi. Calgary. Where else? Texas. See, they're coming in so fast I can hardly. Love my hairdo. Thank you. It's nice to have a new hairdo. Yeah, freshening it up for the summer. Welcome to all of you. We're just super excited. Chrissy and I are very pumped. You are going to love this topic and information that Chrissy's going to share with you. So I'm Joan Burge, founder and CEO of Office Dynamics International. We are a global leader in the development and presentation of sophisticated training programs and information for administrative office professionals. And we've been doing this since 1990. That's a pretty long time. And I've known Chrissy for many years. I'm really happy to say that. It's been a wonderful relationship with Chrissy. So just a few logistics, and then we're going to dig in. The learning part of our session will be about 40 minutes, and then we're going to have time for Q&A. So I hope you have lots of good questions for Chrissy today. I think you will, because her topic is quite different from something you've ever heard before. Our webinar let me backtrack a minute. If you want to pose a question, you can put your question in the chat at any time. And when you type in your message to the right of where you type it, you'll see, I think it's like 3 dots. You could click on that and let us know it is a question. Then Malia will see your icon for that, and she'll be able to pull those faster at the end of our speaking time. Our chat holds about 1,000 attendees, which is a lot of people talking for sure. So we're excited that you're with us and look forward to your contributions throughout this program. If you have any technical issues, the only support we can give you is through the chat. Oh, there's my friend Paula Sandritter. Sorry, I saw your name, Paula. Hello from Walt Disney World. And so please, if you have any of those issues, again, through the chat is the best way we can service you. We do not have a handout for today's webinar, so be sure to take good notes. And I think that's it. Yay, let me introduce Chrissy because I want to get going. Chrissy Scivicque believes that work can be a nourishing, enriching life experience. And she loves helping professionals discover exactly what that means for them and how to achieve it. Her popular website, eatyourcareer.com, is devoted to this mission. As an award-winning writer, certified career coach, and experienced corporate trainer, Chrissy brings a unique perspective to the world of professional development. As a proud former executive assistant, woohoo! Chrissy also has a deep admiration and appreciation for the world of admin and its unique challenges. She is also the proud author of The Proactive Professional, How to Stop Playing Catch Up and Start Getting Ahead at Work, which I could tell you I got her copy when this came out, a couple years ago, I think. And you can see how much I fluffed her book. I have highlights everywhere. I have my flags. I have my notes. I keep referring back to this. This is incredible information. I want to encourage you to get that. And Chrissy just informed me she's just releasing a new book. That sounds super exciting. And I think we need to do another webinar on your new book. So you'll have to tell us about that book as well, Chrissy. So I love Chrissy to death. On a serious note, she is fabulous. She has presented many times at our conference over 28 years, and she is presenting this year at our conference. She is just that incredible, and she's amazing on stage. She knows how to really hold your attention and provide a lot of meaty information. So without further ado, I am happy to introduce my friend and business colleague, Chrissy Scivicque. Welcome.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you. Oh my goodness, I just feel myself just blushing. And I just want to take a moment to echo everything that Joan just said, because it's the Mutual Admiration Society around here. I love Joan so much as well. It's always so much fun when you get to work with a friend. So that's what we're doing today. And we're just already having such a great time together. And I told Joan before our session that I just need a screenshot of her holding up my book like that with all those notes in it. It's like, that is just such a great testimonial. Thanks, Joan. And we are talking about a lot of the things that are included in that book, The Proactive Professional, because this whole concept of systems thinking really applies to that. So I'll just kind of jump right in here and start talking about what we're doing here, because as Joan mentioned, this is a little bit of a different topic for administrative professionals. I know that we tend to use the word systems frequently, and we often do it in the realm of talking about systems and procedures. So we have a system for travel planning, we have a system for meeting management, and that's great. Those are definitely examples of systems. But for today's conversation, we're really going to expand out and talk about systems from a bigger and broader perspective. Yes, systems are definitely associated with procedures, but also there is this bigger concept of systems that I want to share with you, and how it can influence and impact your ability to think deeply about the things that we're doing at work. So I know that Joan mentioned we don't have a handout for today's session, but I myself am a big fan of taking notes in a session like this. So I'm going to help you out whenever there's something that I think you should capture for your notes. I'll let you know. And this first one is something that's important, because we're going to talk about what a system actually is in this way that we're talking about it. So basically, we are talking about a system as being a group of things that are interconnected, so that if one thing changes, other things change as well. That's what we mean by a system. And really, there's three characteristics. So these three things are the things to take a note of. When we're talking about systems, we're talking about three different characteristics here. So the first one is that a system has to have individual components to it. The second thing is that a system, those components have to interconnect in some way. And then the third thing is that they have to interconnect in a meaningful way to support some sort of function together. So if you're capturing that, the three characteristics of a system: number one, they have individual elements or components. Number two, those individual components all interact. And number three, they all work together for a unifying purpose or function. So for example here, really everything in our world is systems. If you really think about it, let's start with the human body. The human body is a system. We have a heart, we have lungs, we have digestion, which is a system in and of itself. We have the endocrine system, the brain, all of these things work together to give us human life. And if one thing isn't working perfectly, then other things can be impacted as well. So it's a system. There's interconnection for a unifying purpose. If one thing changes, other things can change. So you have a body, so you have a life, and your life itself is also a system. You have a social life, you have a romantic life, you have a financial life, you have a work life. All of those things interconnect. And if something changes in one part of your life, it has the ability to impact the other areas of your life. So it's a system. Work itself is a system, right? You probably work on a team, and that team is a system. If one person leaves the team, the entire team dynamic can change. We've probably all experienced that before. Your team works within a department, which works within an organization, both of which are systems. And your organization exists within an industrial system and an economic system and a global system. You know, it goes on and on. So my point here is that we are surrounded by systems, these intricate webs of things that are all tied together. And we have to understand those systems and pay attention to them in order to really be empowered in the workplace, which is a big thing that Joan and I have been talking a lot about lately, because it's the theme of her conference this year. This idea of being empowered really relies on this type of thinking. So I know that Joan and I had kind of talked about some of the key things that we were going to cover today. And so we've discussed what systems are. And now the idea of what systems thinking is. So this is a relatively new term in terms of, you know, how in the last, I would say, decade, it's really become a popular term in the modern business culture. And it comes from the tech world, it comes from engineering, but now it's being applied in other disciplines as well, because it's something that just makes sense, and it's something that can elevate the way that we're thinking in all areas of life. So systems thinking just means that you're paying attention to all of those interconnections all around you, and how what you're doing or not doing has the ability to impact and influence all the things around you. So it's really paying attention to the impacts. You can think of it like this. Again, if you're taking notes, this would be a good thing to take a note on. We'd have linear thinking. And linear thinking is like if you wrote A and drew a line to B, and then you draw a line to C. That's linear thinking. Straight across A to B to C. And that's how most people tend to operate in the workplace. It's very logical, it's very straightforward. But systems thinking is like a whole web. You know, you've got A, and that's connected to F, and F is connected to B, and then B is connected to C, and that draws back to A. There's all of these interconnections, and it's no longer just that straight and simple A, B, C. It's now a whole web. And so we want to be thinking in that kind of web-like fashion. That's systems thinking. I know this is probably all sounding a little abstract right now. I'm going to get to some examples, real-world examples for you. So as an administrative professional, I know that most of you already utilize systems thinking in one form or another, and a really common one would be if you manage your executive's calendar. The calendar is a system, and you all already know that, because you all know if you change one appointment, there's going to be 20 other changes down the road, right? And you're going to have to kind of play Tetris with that calendar. That is something that, as assistants, that's what we do all day long, because the calendar is a system, and you already intuitively understand that. So what we want to do is take that and kind of expand out that concept of understanding the things around us as systems. I think as admins, it's very easy for us to get a little siloed, and we start looking at our world. You know, we're focused on our world, we're focused on our to-do list, and we don't always pay as much attention to the things that are happening around us and in other areas of the business or in other departments, other parts of our, executives' lives. All of those things are interconnected. And so as an assistant, this is a more advanced skill set for sure. But there's really 4 different places that I think this applies the most. Again, another great place to take notes here. The 4 different ways that I think admins can use systems thinking the most are as follows. I'm going to give you all 4, and then I'll give you some examples of each of them. So the first one is in problem solving. So problem solving is number 1. The second one is in prioritization. The third one is in decision making. And then the fourth one is being proactive. My favorite. So 4 different ways: problem solving, prioritization, decision making, and being proactive. So I want to just maybe share some examples here of each of these and how systems thinking can impact what you're doing. But if you think about it, those 4 things, Joan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if assistance improved in these 4 key areas, it would go such a long way to that empowerment concept that we talk about, right?
Yeah, exactly. And really quick, I just want to remind people, while we don't have a handout, you will get a replay link of this. So if you miss anything Chrissy says, you're going to get a replay link. So don't worry. Okay.
Thank you for reiterating that, Joan. I know I get really excited about this stuff. I confess that I'm a total nerd about some things. This is one of them. And so I might talk a little bit fast, and I apologize if I'm doing that, but I'm glad that Joan reminded you, replay, and then anything that's really super important, I will pause and say, take a note.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm taking my notes too. So if I couldn't catch them all, I'll go back and ask you too, but we're good.
Okay.
Just to everyone to remind them they can watch this again.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. So we've got these 4 things. We have problem solving, prioritization, decision making, and being proactive. And systems thinking can help us in all 4 ways. So the first way with problem solving, if you're thinking in systems, you're able to think more deeply about the problems that you encounter. And so you're able to find better solutions. So you're able to say, okay, looking at this problem that I have here in front of me, I can see that it actually stems from these problems that are over here. Or looking at this problem that I have in front of me, I can see that it actually creates all of these other problems over here. So we're thinking more dynamically now about the problem. And then we're able to actually address the root cause of the problem and not just put a Band-Aid on it. A lot of times, administrative professionals address what I call the symptom of the problem rather than actually addressing the cause of the problem and really fixing the problem. So
I want to stop you here a minute, only because I want everyone to know this is exceptionally important what Chrissy is talking about today. You really need to listen and understand what she's saying, because when I'm coaching and working with executives, they will always talk about how they need their assistants to see the bigger picture of how things connect and work together. Don't be so in the woods that you're not looking at the whole forest. So heads up, everyone, be taking your notes. Listen to what Chrissy is talking about. This is an advanced competency. This will really push you into a whole new level of your work and how you're going to be viewed by your executives, and how much richer you will be in what you do at work. So sorry, I just had to throw that in because it's really hitting me now as you're walking us through this.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. I think that this is the thing that can separate an average, good player from a great player in the workplace. And I too hear from executives all the time that these are the types of skills that they need. And it's hard to learn these skills, and you have to practice applying them. But right now it's really just about kind of grasping this concept because it's a big concept. So one of the things that happens, I'll give you an example with this problem solving stuff. Imagine that you're sitting at your desk and your desk is right next to a copier, and that copier keeps on jamming, and everyone keeps on coming up and they're interrupting you to help them unjam that copier because you have magic hands and you know how to unjam that copier. So that's a problem for you. And a lot of administrative professionals will say, you know what? I'm going to solve this problem and I'm going to create a little cheat sheet. and I'll tell them exactly how to fix that jam on their own. And I'll put that cheat sheet on the copier and they'll never bother me again because they'll be able to fix their own jams. The truth is that that is putting a Band-Aid on the symptom of the problem. It's not actually fixing the problem. The reality is that what you should be doing, yes, you can do that. That's a great way. You know, it's a Band-Aid for the time being, but you should also be saying, why is the copier jamming all the time? Let's get it resolved. Let's get it fixed. And maybe you do some exploration and you go, you know what? The person who was in charge of maintenance on that copier left the company 5 years ago, and no one has been handling the maintenance in the meantime. That's the real root of the problem. Let's call the maintenance people. Let's get somebody responsible for this. Let's get on a regular maintenance schedule. That addresses the real problem. So hopefully, you know, it's a super basic example, I know, but that's the type of thing I want you to be thinking about. Don't just think about the Band-Aid. The Band-Aid can still be helpful, but then ask some questions and say, what's the real cause of this problem? How can we stop the problem from happening again? So prioritizing is that second thing that's really a great thing to use your systems thinking for. We all have a task list that's a mile long. We all have competing tasks. So if you have two competing tasks, for example, let's say that your executive's expense report needs to be turned in by the end of the day, and you also need to prep meeting materials for tomorrow, but you don't have time to do both. How do you decide which one to do? Systems thinking helps you to choose the right thing because you start thinking through consequences. If I don't do this one, what happens? If I don't do that one, what happens? Which one has the worst consequences? And maybe you'll discover, you know what? They both have significant consequences if I don't do them. So I'm going to have to bite the bullet and just stay late tonight and get both of them done. But when we're prioritizing, sometimes we have to put some things on the back burner so we can focus on other things. And we need to make sure that we're making the right choices. The things, you know, looking at what else is going to be impacted by those prioritization choices. Unfortunately, a lot of people using linear thinking are looking at that task list and they're saying, well, what's easiest? What's fastest? You know, what can I just check off first? And that's not using the full scope of, you know, systems thinking. It's not thinking critically about what's in front of you.
That's cool because I didn't realize that's what I do. I would like the systems thinking piece because what I do when I've told assistants is instead of saying what's the most important, I have these 8 priorities, what should I do first? I'm always saying change up your question. What I always say is what's the impact if I don't do this? So I didn't know the systems thinking.
You're doing it naturally. And I bet there's probably assistants who are attending right now that are saying, awesome, I do this stuff naturally. And then there's also some who are attending who are saying, oh, I never thought about that. You know?
Well, I think the majority don't switch the question. I really don't. Because I only started thinking about that more as a business owner and so forth. But as an assistant, a lot of times it was, again, we tend to fall into that. Well, what's the most important? What should I do first? What needs to be done first? I think it's a very small percentage, you know, to change that question to get a different answer, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a great way to phrase it.
I own my business. What's the impact if I don't get this done?
Yes, absolutely. Anytime you're talking about impact, it's utilizing systems thinking. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Joan and I are aligned on so many things. This is perfect. So decision making is another one that's really important. A lot of times we make a decision and we don't realize all of the other impacts of that one single decision. And you've got to start thinking about your decisions as kind of setting a precedent. So I'll give you an example. If you have somebody who drops in for a spontaneous meeting with your executive, they don't have an appointment, but you make the decision to go ahead and let them go in and have a spontaneous meeting without an appointment on the books. That decision, you might think it's small and inconsequential, but first off, your executive now can't use that time for something else. But also you've just trained that person that they don't need an appointment. They can drop in and see the executive anytime they want. And you've trained everyone who witnessed that is okay behavior. And they're going to expect you to make that same decision for them in the future. So now you've just created this horrible little chain of consequences for yourself that now people are going to start dropping by because they've seen you do that once. So each decision you make can set yourself up, for problems. If people see that and they say, well, that's the precedent. That's what you did before. That's what you did for that person. So think through your decisions and how they could potentially impact other decisions and other people down the road. And then lastly is being proactive. So this is like step number one in being proactive. I talk about it a lot in my book, The Proactive Professional. And really I talk about it as being big picture thinking, because that's what this is. It's a big picture thinking, looking for those interconnections. So being proactive, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get ahead of the people or the person that we support. We want to be able to anticipate their needs. And the only way we can do that is if we're really paying attention to all of these different things that are happening around them and around us. So for example, when I was an assistant, my executive traveled a ton. And so every time he traveled, I had to think about all of the other things going on in his life. What's happening in his personal life, what's happening with his client load, what's happening with his to-do lists, what's happening with his partners, because all of those things can be impacted by him being out of the office for 2 weeks. So anytime I'm planning travel, it's not just about planning the travel itinerary. It's about thinking about what potentially is going to come up in these 2 weeks that we need to backtrack and handle now so that he, is ahead of the game and he doesn't end up caught off guard while he's on his trip. So we can be proactive and get ahead of the needs of our executives if we stop and we pull ourselves out of that, just total task focus, and we think about the big picture and say, what else could be impacted here? So that's, hopefully that helps you see all 4 of those categories about how we can use this in our thinking. Joan, is this all making sense, all resonating?
Yes, definitely. It makes a lot of sense to me. I hope it does to them. And building on that big picture piece, that's why, too, I came to you for conference, thinking about who would I have speak this year, because our theme this year is the empowered assistant. So for those of you who don't know, every year I choose a particular theme for our conference. And I want all our speakers to address that theme from a different view. And there's a lot of power when you spend 2.5 days focused on one main topic, but you're looking at it from many angles, many perspectives. The what you walk away with and the opportunity to really change your behaviors is huge. So, Chrissy, of course, I really thought about how do you be empowered, like as an individual? It isn't about your executive empowering you. You and I know we have to empower ourselves. We don't wait for others. And to me, I really saw power when you start using the systems thinking. You're not at the mercy of everything else, or you're not caught off guard, because not that never something won't happen, but I'm picturing if you're using that thinking, like you said, where you're seeing all these other pieces around it, you can be more proactive. You can take the initiative if you've kind of thought about what could be the impact. Or I like what you just said about the last piece when you're doing the travel planning. To me, that's part of the big picture and being future focused. Like in May, so for example, I was gone a great deal of May. 80% of May I was out of the office, traveling either for personal, a lot for professional. So really in April, Malia needed to take a look at, Joan is only in the office 4 days in May. and then what does she have in June? So what's, like you said, right? What could occur? What could be impacted? How is this going to affect things? And that's where I think that big picture thinking comes into play, and being future focused, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All of it, yes. And it's sort of like ground zero for being proactive. And you know, as we've said, this is definitely an advanced skill set. It's something that we have to practice. And as you know, Joan and I have talked about this topic a little bit outside of today's session, and we both kind of talked about the fact that sometimes this comes really naturally for some people. They think in this way. And then a lot of times, though, with administrative professionals, we're very detail oriented, which is necessary and good. And it supports you in being a strong administrative professional. But that detail orientation can sometimes put blinders on so that we don't think about everything else. We're so focused on all of the details of the perfect travel itinerary that we don't pause to look at the bigger picture and the other things impacted.
Yeah, so how then what advice do you have for the person? Like, some people, this may more naturally come because they're just kind of a big picture thinker, but what about those who, you know, how do you train yourself? How do they condition themselves to really make this a part of their day, not just be so tunnel visioned and work on autopilot all day?
I think that there's a few different strategies. So keep in mind, you know, those four primary areas that we want to be thinking about. So problem solving, prioritization, decision making, and being proactive. It's really, you know, I'm just thinking here through, you know, some of the times that I've worked with people and it doesn't come naturally to them, and they can end up in some difficult places because they didn't think in using systems. They didn't think about the bigger picture. I had a client not long ago who, in her prioritization process, she made a decision. She was supposed to be doing some research on a new vendor. And she said, you know what, that's something I could probably put on the back burner. And so she postponed doing that research. And because she postponed it, then they ran out of time for changing vendors, and they ended up in a new contract with the vendor that they wanted to leave.
Oh, no.
Yeah, just made like the wrong decision prioritizing. We've all probably done that, but you know, this is those disastrous consequences that we talk about in the webinar description. You know, I've seen it so many times, and something like that can be easily prevented by pausing. So probably like number one is pause and be strategic in what you're doing. Whether you're problem solving or prioritizing or making a decision, pause and allow yourself the time that you need to think strategically about what's going on. Always be looking for the big picture. You know, you want to think through the consequences, not just the immediate consequences, but longer term consequences, and think about all aspects of the situation. So another area of disastrous consequence that I've seen with decision making, you know, I see people make career decisions based on one factor, right? They have an opportunity and they say, oh, it's a 30% pay raise, I have to do this. And so they make the decision based on the pay, and then they don't consider the other factors. And oh, this position actually requires a much longer commute. Because of that commute, now you're not spending as much time with your family. And now your family life is starting to decrease. And you know what? That commute, actually, now we're paying more in gas and we're paying for car maintenance now. So that big old raise we thought we were getting slowly is diminished. You know, and we didn't look at all the different aspects. We just saw one thing and we made a decision based on that one thing. So look at all the different aspects of a situation. Ask questions, get curious, you know, especially with in the workplace, you know, with things happening in the organization, don't be afraid to sit down with your executive and say, I know we have this big marketing initiative that's happening. And I know that they have some really exciting goals happening over there. How do you think that that impacts our department? Here are some things that I've been thinking about. Have those types of discussions. I can tell you executives love that stuff. And so, just don't be afraid to kind of throw that out. I know when I was an assistant, I was in financial services, and this was from the years of like 2005 to 2008. We were in like the credit crisis of the century, and all sorts of crazy things were happening in the financial world. And I remember talking to my executive frequently saying, I just read this. How do you think that that's going to impact our clients? And he appreciated being able to have those conversations, because then it starts him thinking too. And we were able to get proactive about contacting clients, so have those conversations. Question your assumptions, especially when problem solving. Ask yourself, what's the real problem here? Don't just put a Band-Aid on the situation. Dig deeper to figure out what that problem is, because you want to make sure your solution really solves the real problem and doesn't just put a Band-Aid on, but also doesn't create unintended consequences down the road.
Sorry, I'm just looking. There is like a lot of some really good stuff coming in that I think we have a lot of questions. So
okay.
Maybe I'll just take another minute and then we should get to these. Hopefully Malia can see that they're actually questions, because some of them are scenarios. But one, just tying into what you said, Candy's asking, how do you get your exec to share information so that it is easier to see a big picture? A lot of times I am looking out for information, but may not get all the information needed to follow through. Mm-hmm. So I think that goes to what you were saying. And I think this is, again, where when we talk about the empowered assistant, like, I don't know why, and I'm sure you see it a lot, Chrissy, but I see it a lot. Assistants are afraid to ask their executives questions and gather more information, or I feel like assistants don't feel that they should be posing a lot of questions. I mean, I'll hear things like, well, my executive is so busy, I really don't want to be asking a lot of questions. But if you're the empowered assistant, you have every right to ask questions, especially if they're pertinent to business and they're going to help you do your job better. So I guess this also speaks to one of the themes in conference, which is confidence and courage. So when we have our conference this year, our speakers are addressing confidence, confidence, courage, and competency. And I think you're talking a lot about the competency piece here, the skill. How do you do it? And you've outlined that. At conference, we're also going to talk about the courage piece, because you have to have the courage to insert yourself in your executive's world and not feel bad about asking questions to get the bigger picture. Do you know what I'm saying, Chrissy, right? So what advice do you have? How do we build up that, help assistants to see that they have this right to ask questions, and of course if you do it in the right way? And so what advice do you have?
So true. And I do know exactly what you're talking about, because I hear it all the time as well, that people are trying to reduce the amount of time that they communicate with their executive as much as possible, because my executive is so busy. And so first off, I think your point is very well taken, that confidence and courage, and recognizing that this is not only something that you can do, it's actually an obligation and a responsibility in your role. So that's one thing. At the same time, though, I also recognize that there is a realistic time crunch always. And so I was thinking back to some of the conversations that I had with my executive back in the day about the credit crisis in particular. I remember many times we would do a walk and talk. So he'd be walking out to his car at the end of the day, and I would just say, I'm just going to walk with you. And in that time, we would always have some more casual conversations. But it was kind of a good time that I could hold him hostage to have some conversations. And we would end up standing at his car and just talking for sometimes it was like we could spend 45 minutes standing out there, which is pretty cool. So leverage opportunities like that. Where can you do a walk and talk? Where can you hold them hostage? Even just like riding down the elevator with them. Do it.
Yeah, well, yeah, if they're walking to a meeting and it's a 10-minute walk, I mean, you grab any, I mean, I used to do that too. You grab them whenever you can.
Totally. And be clear about what it is that you want to talk to them about, what it is that you want to ask. Ask specific questions, but also observe. Sometimes I do feel that we have to also take responsibility for just figuring things out rather than asking questions. If we can observe a situation and come to logical conclusions, then we should be doing that. And perhaps, speaking with other assistants or speaking with people in other departments, you can start to gain context that way rather than relying solely on your executive to provide you with context. You can get it in other ways too. You've developed strategic relationships throughout your organization, and that way you don't have to rely on just getting your executive's perspective on what's happening in the organization. You can gather a lot of information, and all of that adds to your big picture. Really great question. I appreciate the person who asked that.
I think that's even the chapter in your book. You have the big picture understanding, and you tell there are ways, you say right here, how do you get that bigger picture? So if you get Chrissy's book, which is available at her website.
Yeah, it's
right?
on Amazon. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, on Amazon. Okay. So you've got it right in here, ways to do that. And I think reading was part of it too, and your team and so forth. So, all right. Well, Malia, let's get to questions because I think there are several questions for you. So
I bet this is a meaty topic.
It is a meaty topic. It's great.
It is, and people are very much enjoying this.
Good.
Okay, so let's see. Kristen is asking, how do you highlight systems thinking on a resume?
Ooh, really great question. Woo. And I love it. I think that you should be saying, utilizes systems thinking to, and then talk about the result of what that systems thinking allows you to do. To solve problems, make better decisions. If you can point to specific accomplishments where you've had to use systems thinking to achieve a really fantastic result for your team or for your company. So maybe you've worked on a project, and in that project, you had to coordinate with different parts of the company, and you had to understand how that project would impact those different parts of the company. Highlight that and use the term systems thinking, because like I said, it's really becoming a very popular concept. It's a little bit of a buzzword in some companies. And it's definitely just going to become more of a thing as technology, does its magic. We're all going to be understanding this concept of systems even more.
Okay, great.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Yes. Michelle is asking, Chrissy, utilizing the skills you are addressing today sometimes leads peers and management to think that you are being a busybody or aggressive. Can you share best steps for those brave admins to use to negate this perception?
Yes. Oh, and I also want Joan to chime in too when I'm done. But I think that for me, because I hear that from people. Well, I don't want to ask questions about anything that's potentially not my job. It's like outside the scope of my job description. If I'm asking those questions, then don't I look like I'm getting in other people's business? And so one of the things that I always encourage when it comes to communication, you are interpreted largely based on tone of voice. Tone has the ability to transmit meaning far more than words. So make sure that your tone is curious. And what you're doing is you're saying, hey, what are you guys working on over there? It just sounds like there's so much exciting stuff happening in marketing. What's going on? Showing enthusiasm and being curious is different than, sounds like there's a lot going on over there. What are you guys doing in marketing, right? Like I said the exact same words, but my tone was different. My body language was different. So I mean, make sure that you're approaching it in an inquisitive, enthusiastic, interested way, and be receptive to your audience. If people are treating it like it's super secret, it's top secret, be like, oh, I totally understand. It just looked really interesting. You know, you don't have to pry, and you don't have to do anything that you feel is overly aggressive. So that's where I go with that answer. But like I said, I am a little bit curious about how Joan would address this, because I hear this type of concern frequently.
That sounds good. I think I would agree with your approach of it's curiosity, and coming from that perspective of I'm really curious and I really want to learn more and understand the bigger picture of what we're doing and maybe how we connect. And it's kind of like what I call informational interview you're doing with that individual. But I fully agree with you, Chrissy, like it's that tone. And if I come at it like, wow, I really would like to understand a little bit more about, what your area does or what this project is about, because I'd like to see the bigger picture and maybe how my pieces might have to fit in with your group, or your pieces might be fitting in with my group. It would be great to have that bigger understanding. So I think if we say it in that respect and being respectful of that individual versus like we're digging. So I would say that's the first thing, as you said, the approach, the tone, the words we use are very important, coming across being inquisitive and curious. And then I would say when you've done all of those things, if somebody still has an issue with it, then it's their issue. So just be done with it and move on and explore other areas where people are going to be open and willing to share.
I think sometimes it's a cultural thing too. In some organizational cultures, people just aren't sharing and they're very territorial. And so anybody asking what we're doing over here on our team makes people feel threatened. And so you do have to be aware of what the culture is in your organization. Hopefully you don't work in an organization like that. Hopefully it's a sharing culture. But just be receptive and use your emotional intelligence as you're attempting to do all of this.
That's good. That's very good. All right, what's next?
Okay, Sherry is asking, in trying to be proactive, how do you get your manager/director to let go of some of their work that you can do for him or her?
Oh, this is so good. This one always comes up. And so, yes, I think that this is a struggle for a lot of administrative professionals. There's so many more ways that they could be leveraged. And we sometimes have to train our executives on how to best utilize us. And if they're trying to hold tight to something that you could take over really, easily, or, there would be just no issue for you to take it over, I always recommend a few things. So number one is I love a trial period. Let's do a little pilot program. Why don't we try this? I'll take it over for 30 days. And then we'll come back. And if you don't like the way I'm doing it, or it doesn't work for you, I will give it back to you, no questions. So the pilot period is always a great way to start. And then remember to chunk it down. I think one of the best examples I've ever experienced was a client that I had, an executive and assistant partnership, and the assistant was pushing for being able to access his email. And, she wanted to be fully in the email inbox and responding to emails on his behalf and all this stuff. And it's like, no, let's chunk it down. Small pieces. First steps, first things first, just read-only access. That's all you want to do, is you just want to read it so you can have context. And then once we get that, then we can take another bite, and then we can take another bite. But don't try to take on, whole things at once, because that can be overwhelming. And be persistent, pleasant persistence. If you ask once and it's not happening, don't be afraid to go back and say, have you reconsidered this? I've thought of some other ways that this might be useful. I've had multiple executives tell me that they appreciate the pleasant persistence, because as they're worn down, once they eventually say yes, they go, oh, I'm so glad I said yes to that, because it really is helpful. So those would be my recommendations.
Awesome.
Those are all, I agree with Chrissy 100%. I have another suggestion to add that too I will share with assistants is to help them see the time and hours you will save. So when I was an assistant, there was one of my executives who had to do this report every week, and he was the head manager. And it was a matter of pulling numbers from different places. So I remember I put something together for him that, in other words, if you will, maybe he needed to spend an hour with me to teach me where to pull the numbers, how to do that report. But I showed him how if you teach me this and it takes you an hour to show me how to do it, once I can take it over, I will save you an hour a week, or let's say a half hour a week times 52 weeks was X amount of hours. Imagine what you could do if you got back 30 hours, let's say. I don't know the exact calculation right now, but I always try to show them, and I tell executives today too, look at the time you're spending on this, even if you have to teach your assistant a little bit, how many hours is that person going to save you in the long run that you could be spending on something more important that impacts the bottom line of the company, that brings more importance. So help them. Sometimes they don't realize because it's just, oh, I can handle that, I could do that. Or they want to hand stuff off, but oh, by the time I have to explain it to you, forget it, I'll do it myself. And that's what Chrissy was saying about training your executive, helping them to see why this could be beneficial to them if they would start to release some things. And also we're finding today executives, because they are techno savvy and they are independent, they're doing a lot of things they should not be doing. Even though they're capable of doing it, I tell them all the time, the executives, I know you can do this. I know you could respond to an email. I know you could set your own appointment. I know you can book your own travel if you want to, but it doesn't mean you should be doing it. That's not what that's not what they're paid the big bucks to do. So I think it's even more challenging today for an assistant to get them to let go, because many executives and managers are very independent, but it doesn't mean they should be doing what they're doing. That's not what their main job is, and you need to get them to see that.
Yeah, that formula that you mentioned is that is so brilliant, because it's speaking in the executive's language. They understand return on investment. So if you take that formula to them, that can be a really, really compelling message.
Okay, let's take another one, Malia. These are good questions.
They are.
Yes, they are. Okay, Stephanie says, I sit outside my CEO's office, what I call central corner. Everyone comes to me for everything. Though it's part of my job, it becomes where everyone thinks their request is a priority, and they don't ask if she's doing something important. Also, many coworkers do this as a last-minute request. So how do I prevent so many interruptions without being rude?
Oh, I can do a whole training session on this one. So I'm going to try to shrink this up as simply as possible. So I truly believe that as an administrative professional, you have to learn how to handle interruptions, because in most organizations, it's not really a thing that you can put like a do not disturb sign on, right? Like you've got to be available, but you also have to manage these things. And so typically when I talk about interruptions, I talk about two different pieces to it. One is concise communication, and then the other is rapid refocus. So concise communication means that you're very quickly finding out from people what it is that they need. And you're also posing back to them to say, is this an immediate need, or can this wait? If it can wait, how long can it wait? So you're having that quick, concise communication, and then learning how to rapidly refocus to get back to what it was that you were working on before the interruption. So I do strongly advocate for managing expectations and not simply just allowing other people to dictate your priorities all day. Inquiring and asking, is this something that you need right now? And getting clarification, because a lot of times people will say, I need this as soon as possible. And you interpret that as, well, I need to drop everything and do this. But really what they mean is, I just need this by the end of the day. So getting clarification on expectations, and making sure that you are prioritizing in the correct way using that systems thinking. So you're letting them know, I have ABC project that I am devoted to today. Does it make sense to reprioritize and put that one on the back burner for this new priority you've just handed me? Letting them know the context of what it is that you're working within. Briefly, you don't want to get too deeply into it, but those are just some of the things that are like top of my mind with this. There's a lot of different strategies for managing expectations and managing interruptions. And as an administrative professional, I truly believe that you have unique circumstances because your role is to support other people. And so a lot of the traditional time management tips don't necessarily work perfectly for you. So again, I come back to always concise communication and rapid refocus. That is what we have to learn to do as administrative professionals. We're never going to be able to just make interruptions go away.
That's awesome.
Do we have time for more, Joan, or did you want
Go ahead. Yeah, we have time for one more, and then we have some special announcements for everyone today.
Okay, Laritza, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. How do you handle conflicting priorities with the same level of urgency and consequences from multiple executives?
This is where I think that, I do some training on managing multiple managers. If you've got 3 different people that you're supporting, get clear on the front end. Does one have priority? I had a primary executive that I supported, but then I also supported his associate partners, but they were kind of secondary. He was always my primary. So get clear if there's anything like that that can help you establish what would come first in that scenario. Also, if truly they're all even and all of their priorities are even and have even consequences, then it's time to bring people together and say, what's the correct roadmap here? Like, how do we want to be managing these things if all things are equal? It's like I always say, you can't have, not everything can be an A #1 priority. Not, if that's what it is, then you have no priorities. You can't manage that way. You have to be able to dictate what the true priority is. And sometimes you need guidance from your team for that. So don't be afraid, again, to kind of sit down and have more of a strategic conversation to say, all of these things are equal. How do we as a team want to be managing these priorities when all things are equal? That's where I would go with that.
That's fantastic. Really good. All right. Well, I know we could go on and on and on.
We could.
We do have to bring some closure. So please stay on if you can for a couple more minutes, because I have something exciting I want to tell you right now, and then I want to do a wrap, kind of a closure with Chrissy. So if you could stay on, that would be awesome. But Chrissy, I'm super excited about seeing you at conference in October. I can't wait. It's been a few years since you've been here, and your topic, as we just started to uncover it briefly today, has been phenomenal. Definitely that advanced skill. So we do have a very special offer today, phenomenal offer actually, for those of you who have attended this live webinar with us, that we're going to give you a special discount of $200 off conference registration if you register by June 13th and use a promo code, which is going to be sent to you. I don't know if Brian's putting that in the box right now. Also, though, with that, if you register by then, you're going to get all our conference on demands. Huge library. There's probably, I don't know, do we have 4 or 5 years with 10 hours in each year of phenomenal speakers? We've had the Revolutionary Assistant, the Resilient Assistant. Last year we had the Stellar Assistant, plus you'll get this year's. And here's something super, super exciting I want to tell you about. if you register by June 13th, your name will be put in the hat to win an incredible package, VIP package from Red Rock Resort, which is the venue for our conference. Here's what you get. 2-night stay in a deluxe room, complimentary, 2 nights. That covers a lot for your conference. Complimentary 2 feast buffet vouchers, and their buffet's phenomenal. You'll get VIP round trip transportation. So your transportation's taken care of. So I don't know, that's a pretty cool package. So again, but you have to register before June 13th. You'll get the $200 off. You get all conference on demands. You'll get this, your name entered in this fabulous VIP package from the gorgeous, incredible Red Rock Resort, and you'll get to see the amazing Chrissy Scivicque, plus all our other phenomenal speakers who are coming. We're going to have a Denim and Diamond Gala this year, which is going to be a ton of fun. So Chrissy, any closing words you want to say to everyone?
I will just say that it has been an absolute pleasure. I can't wait to see all of you at Red Rocks, because I can tell you, when Joan's talking about that deluxe room there and the buffet, it's absolutely amazing. It is a beautiful venue. I'm thrilled to be back there, and we're going to have a ton more great conversations. I feel like Joan and I could sit here all day and talk with you guys. Unfortunately, we can't, but I'm thrilled that we'll be able to do that at conference. So thank you, everyone. And please keep in touch with me. Visit my website at eatyourcareer.com so we can keep in touch.
And quickly, the name of your new book and what's it about? Really
Yes. Quick. Yes. My new book is The Invisibility Cure: How to Stand Out, Get Noticed, and Get What You Want at Work. All too often I hear administrative professionals tell me that they feel invisible at work. And this is all about how to get over that and raise your visibility, get seen, get noticed, get what you want.
Woohoo, and be empowered.
Yes, exactly. It all ties together.
It all comes together. All right, everyone. Thank you so very much. Loved having you on today's event. And Chrissy, thank you so much for your energy and enthusiasm and fabulous knowledge and tips. I love you very much, and I can't wait to see you in October.
Thank you. You too. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Bye.